Lad, Caribbean people can chat. The Style and Vibes Podcast, Episode 2. Welcome to the Style and Vibes Podcast with me, Michaela. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on music, fashion, culture, and more from Caribbean celebrities and tastemakers across the globe, pushing our culture with authenticity and, of course, style and vibes. Food is a huge part of Caribbean culture. I'm super proud and excited to have this episode of the Style and Vibes podcast sponsored by Callaloo Box. Started by Trini sisters Malika and Jamila, based here in the U.S., Callaloo Box is a subscription box dedicated to Trini seasonings, condiments, hot pepper sauces, and snacks. Their monthly themed box creates a nostalgic feeling of being back home. You don't have to wait till your friend them to get something for you and bring it back, You can even purchase the items that you like from the box on their online shop. Visit callaloobox.com and check the show notes for more details. We're celebrating Caribbean American Heritage Month here on the Style and Vibes Podcast, Episode 2. My special guest today is Kerry-Ann Reid-Brown, the founder of Carry-On Friends podcast. She is extended Style and Vibes family, and we've collaborated many of times before. Excuse us while we chat enough, but keep it fun as we talk about celebrating our Caribbean heritage. Welcome, Kerry-Ann Reid-Brown of Carry-On Friends.
Why? When you and your daughter use the full name, I find it funny. But anyway, yes, thank you for having me, darling.
Well, Kerry, you and I have a great working relationship. We've been kind of working together over the last few years. So this is definitely going to be an easy conversation as we are talking about Caribbean Heritage Month. Since this is happening during a key time for us, what do you think about people who are celebrating Caribbean heritage on a daily basis? Why would the month itself be important, especially like for people like us who are kind of in the know and happening and that kind of stuff already? Why is this month important? Why do you think it's important?
So believe it or not, right? There's a lot of contributions Caribbean Americans have made, not just on their local island country, but in the U.S. and globally. And it's an opportunity to take that time to make that recognition that we've contributed so many, the Shirley Chisholms, the Harry Belafontes, and, more contemporaneously, you have people, the Rihannas, the Nicki Minaj, as an opportunity to educate other people about our culture and to give that visibility. And also it is, we take for granted, you and I have, as we say, Yankee Pitney. And it's also an opportunity for them to with the additional festivities going on, so they could be more immersed, because they take it for granted living in the house with us. Mm-hmm. But, it is something that they can use to learn more about their culture and themselves. And I think that, being recognized is important as also part of, what's the word I'm looking for? Building community. Because as much as it's been around since 2005, not many people know that it is a month. It is a thing. So there's a lot more work to do around the recognition of the month, but it's also knowing where else is having, activity. So I know, being part of the month celebration activities, knowing what's happening, I'm like, there's stuff going on in Vegas. And yes, I know Caribbean people all over, but you're like, really? That much of what's in Vegas, that's going to have this whole thing going on. Mm-hmm. And I know it sounds away, but when you're over here in Brooklyn, the Mecca of the or in New York area, it's almost, it's almost like, and I should know this because I lived in Wisconsin, and whenever people said Jamaicans are West Indian, I'm like, yes, Chicago is right there. So I know people are there, but it's always this amazing feeling to discover, like, oh my God, there's really a large population here. Mm-hmm. Or there are places you never think of. Mm-hmm. And so when you think of it that way, we're spreading the culture even bigger and further out of the region than anyone could ever imagine. And, there's a New York flair to Caribbean culture, and I'm sure there's going to be a Vegas flair to Caribbean culture. So I think it's important that, as a month collectively, celebrate and recognize how different people and parts of the country are celebrating, the month.
Yeah, because even I saw that there I saw that there was a San Francisco carnival, and it's something I had never even heard of. So I was like, yeah, we must be deep over this too. But I think it's interesting to kind of, we bring our culture wherever we go, and there's different pockets, whether it be here in the US, in Canada, in Europe, it's all over in Asia. They have all these different kind of events. You have in a carnival in Japan, those kinds of things. So I think the more we kind of space out, the diaspora becomes the ambassador to the region. So how do you think that, the Caribbean region and its diaspora can kind of almost play off of each other in that sense?
I mean, I think they're already doing that now. I mean, Caribbean culture worldwide, it's influencing a whole bunch of things. And what you're seeing is this integration of the culture. And I think this is also the part where people kind of get concerned. There's such an integration with the culture that, for instance, in Toronto, have my friends in Toronto, and no, Ravan, I'm not moving to Toronto. I love it, but it's cool.
I love
every
Toronto.
time. Yeah, every time he's like, you see, when you move into Canada, I'm like, But anyway, like for instance, Toronto, it's the culture is so much embedded and it's mixed in and mashed in that no, it's so part of the Toronto culture that it's like, people tend to fit. That's why the Drakes and the Justin Biebers can do certain things, and even to an extent, The Weeknd can do and say and be certain things, and it's almost like I say, well, that's kind of how they talk because it's so embedded in that city and part of that culture. And so this is what's happening worldwide, and I think when you hear it, like I can mostly speak to dancehall, not that I don't listen to soca, but when you hear and this has always been the case of dancehall artists, when they're singing song, they will big up Toronto and they will big up all of these places because they know that when they travel to these cities, they're getting influenced. They're observing how Jamaicans in New York or, Caribbean people in New York or Caribbean people in Toronto or Caribbean people in Atlanta, they observe how people in different cities do different things. And some of that they take back with them. And so at some point, it's just this natural bidirectional flow of influence and culture that it gets sometimes very hard to see, which way, like there's some probably things to like, why did Spice choose Atlanta versus New York, right? And I'm sure that has to do with so many things that may be more aligned with where she was going. Yes, she'll come visit New York. So I think that is how it's already happening, a bidirectional influence of the culture from city, not just like US, but from a city to city perspective, from a country to country perspective. And I have inside knowledge of the future interviews coming up. So, a future guest kind of alluded to this, based on the future, the performance and where is better. And that I think is more indicative of, how the culture is carried and what they prefer,
So do you think that the kind of integration is watered down, or is it just evolving?
It's evolving and it's different, right? The same way we can say, I like roti or jerk chicken from this shop here versus that shop. That's kind of really what it feels like to me. It's different based on who is serving it. It's not that it's bad or it's good. It's just a different flavor.
I like that. I like that a lot. So in terms of the next generation, so, I was born here. Both my parents are of Caribbean descent, born in Jamaica. Ethan is growing up in that same, will grow up with that same mentality, Sanai will grow up with that same, and these are our kids, sorry. So, in terms of, taking that into the next generation and, them having that same care and respect for the cultural contributions, what do you think how will that evolve, and how will we keep them engaged on a regular basis, like how we were, or at least how I was coming up?
So I can say this. For me and you, music is life. For real though. Music is life. Yeah. And,
dance, everything.
Listen. Hey, before we drink up on the call, I was ready for draw the Admiral Bailey back, for vibes up the call and thing. But anyway, music is life. And the first connection to culture is music. Like, as you know, I just have my like a 3-month-old and I sing and I play music. Not that me can't sing, but you're supposed to do all of these things. And that is, in addition to the language, music is the next exposure, my kids have. So my daughter, she's not really in the culture like that, but she gets back around it. So I remember she had liked, the Bobby Brown Jr., Damian Marley, Beautiful, and she liked the Etana Warrior Love because I was singing it, and she hears certain things. But then at one point she had her Drake phase, and so she comes back around the culture that way because Drake I call people chargy and all of that. So she comes back around that way. Whereas my Ethan, my dancer, everybody had a dancer, but my Ethan a dancer, right? Ethan, I don't know what was happening, and one day we were watching a video because Ethan loves to dance. Ethan dance everywhere. Ethan dance to the fridge. Ethan dance to the bath.
Ravers with them, calling.
So yes, Ethan Ravers is his name now. I don't remember what happened. I honestly don't remember what happened, but we were watching the BBC One Extra performance or special with a Ding Dong and Ravers, and Ethan saw it. My gosh, now that thing is on repeat in my house because Ethan studied it. Ethan watches all of the Ding Dong videos. I know how it started. So it was through Boys Girls Champ situation. You know how Jamaicans were crazy for their running. And it was Calabar again took Boys, champs, and there was this whole like flash mob type dance scene where they were dancing to Dweet, Ding Dong and the Ravers dance. And Ethan was just like, let me see it. And he was watching it. So because he wanted to watch it and the clip was about like maybe a minute, I had to find an extended version because he wanted to watch it. And I knew what he was seeing was only a portion of that song or the dance. So that's how we came up on the BBC One Extra video, which I love that programming anyway, because the one with Coffee and Chronics and the ones with Lieutenant Stitch, like that whole programming, I love it. And so Ethan now has found all of Ding Dong video them, and Ethan practices all of the dancing until recently his school had like so he was at school. Let me share the video with you, Michaela. So I've recorded videos of Ethan doing his fling for everybody. And he recently did a performance at school. He was part of a performance at school. And Ethan was adding Ding Dong swag wallop in the whole thing. And here my husband, you see where you start? And I'm like, know him after all, supposed to know him culture. So music, dancing by extension is just kind of how our kids will get involved. And that's part of why I love the clean version of songs. Because, back in the day, I couldn't make, there's no way. And that's part of why Ariel, my daughter, isn't as she doesn't gravitate to the music as much, because when she was growing up, there weren't like specific clean versions of songs the way, not like over here where Hot 97 or whichever one of these radio stations bleep out songs. In Jamaica specifically, there has to be a cleaner version to the song where there's no beeps or bleeps in it. So she came up in a time where there weren't really many songs that I could play that were clean that she would say, oh, okay, I know the song. My son Ethan has that privilege, so we can drive in the car and play certain songs. I could, back in the day, I could have driven in the car with her sing blah, 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 or whatever. But as soon as the picnic come in that car, I have to turn off music because, it wasn't appropriate. So now the benefit of having this type of music, now Ethan can sing it. Are there some adult language still in there? Yes, but I'm too young to understand. The same way we were too young to understand when Little Lenny was singing sort of song or certain song. Like, when you look back and say, really and truly, that me when they sing. So, like for him, it's just really music, and they see it part of pop culture now. So now it's almost like, well, oh yeah, my mother talks like that in the house. I'm my daddy and my sister and my grandmother. And so now they're making these connections early. It may not have meaning, but they're making the connections early. So now when they're hearing a song and somebody, if they're listening to Ariana or somebody and they say something that they know is deliberately Caribbean, they could pick up on it and say, oh, mommy says that, and Ethan will come back and say, I hear this song. So they're recognizing it. And I think it's language is first for anyone, but it's music, and then language and food and music, because I'm have to eat the food. Sometimes I'm not eat it. It's like, I don't want that, but it's really through music and dance. Most of, and depending on the child, for some it might be music, for some it might be food, but for my picnic, me know it is straight dancing. So I have to make sure I find all the dance videos. And the thing about dancing for me, because me used to could have do a one move, the dancing now, a lot of it is like, there's definitely woman dance and you have man dance, and then there's dance in between that both can do. And I don't want to even go into the whole, but man dance are clearly dance, whereas woman, if you're going to do it in a sneakers and pants, I do it. You can't dress up and dance. And so for my very active son, ding dong style of dancing, and, maybe other people he's exposed to over time, it fits better with his style. Whereas with my daughter, should I look and say, I don't know about all that, and so, and which is what I personally would love to see in dance hall, to kind of have a type of dance where me in a cute heels and dress can do without the extra over exerting myself, the way that you did have like pepper seed. If you never have to do it all the way, but you can do like a dainty, or you can do the Jerry Springer cute wise, them type of thing. But anyway, we don't go too far in the culture. But yes, that's so really dancing.
You're gonna work out the angel dance soon.
Yes, that's the angel, and the whole, signal playing, those little things that are very, because that's also the way you incorporate parts of the audience, because some dance look very overwhelming for people. In a high school, I would be all the way on Jenna Bugs, but no, Lord Jesus, no, I'm too old for that. So no, but again, to your original point, dancing, music, and depending on, the interest, there's always food, adding, modern flair to, traditional cuisine, that type of thing. So I think there are different ways that your children can embrace the culture, but it depends on your child's interest.
I think I agree. I think for me, music was probably the biggest influence in terms of me having that natural interest in my own culture. I remember, my mom playing all kind of, she played steel pole, she played Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, she played everything. She played dubs. So it make it like, I remember going to school for the first time and I'm like, I didn't know that there were other music. You're driving mommy car, you can't touch your
yeah.
So
hey,
I only
are you
knew,
here for?
I only knew, what was being played in the house, the different foods that we ate. Like I didn't really, it wasn't until I went to school that I kind of started to understand, there are significant differences between, what I have interest in and what other people have interest in. And it kind of allowed me to even go a little bit deeper. Like I remember, going to my first Beanie Man concert. I remember hitting the Parkway for the first. Yo, Mr. Beanie Man, let me tell you.
I love Beanie Man.
Now going to tour. This is before Beanie Man have dreads.
Yes.
After Kali. No. I remember this because I remember it distinctly because there's this place in New Haven called Toad's Place. And it was, I don't even know if I technically should have been there, but it was open to everybody. Me sit down right on the stage, like to the side. Beanie Man had his hair slicking up one ponytail. Remember when the Jerry curl did in?
Yes, I remember that
phase.
The
man have on a purple, like
the enough gal in a bongo phase.
With the shoulder pads. Him have on him black patent leather shoes with no socks. And it was like, for me, I was just like, I was singing every song. I was, I was just dancing, and it was such, and even like, my uncle, he played in a band. So I would see him and I had such an appreciation for music that I think that kind of was my gateway. So I totally understand, in terms of the relations that you have, and you pick one. Some people are more into, the food or the fashion or just being in that space. And for me, even though I didn't grow up in Jamaica, I always, when I go to Jamaica, I feel like that's home for me. So it doesn't feel like, I'm not worry about wagwan and this and that and, watch where you, of course you have to move certain way, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But, I step off the plane and I feel the air coming off when y'all walk off of the airplane and going manly.
No, they don't do that no more, but back in the day,
in the day, yeah. But like even at that stage, it just felt like, it just feels like home for me. So I think that, that whole musical connection was my personal gateway into the culture. So I see with Ethan, I'm gonna be a big dancer. Big dancer, Ethan. But I think it's important to kind of have these conversations, especially, outside of just, expressing it during Caribbean American Heritage Month. It's important to spend time understanding your culture, bringing it into your household, and making sure that outside of, this one time frame that you kind of do it continuously. And I think it's natural for us. So, I'm staying naturally inquisitive, understanding the history, understanding how the different islands kind of interact with each other. I think it's something as I got older that I really wanted to get to know and learn more about, because, the culture in Jamaica is very different than the culture in Guyana and Trinidad. Not that it's very different, but there are a lot of different nuances in terms of how we interact. So, Carnival in Trinidad is definitely different than Carnival in like St. Lucia. There's a mashup happening now, but I think that is because of the easier access to, the inter-islands and social media and the internet, where you can literally see everything that is happening on other islands in an instant moment. And I think it helps. But it's also where, you want to make sure that each island keeps their individuality and nuances of their own culture, because that's kind of what makes the Caribbean and the different islands very spicy, you keep it different.
I agree. I think for me, the importance that I've learned about Caribbean Heritage Month is, I was born and raised in Jamaica. I went to high school. I left high school halfway through and then moved here. And then I went to high school here, which was a completely different experience. And I feel like my time at Wingate was just so, it was my zone school, and most immigrant kids who come up, right before school start, because that's what the parents then plan, right? They travel in the summer, or some are right before school starts, so you can start school in time for September. And when that happens, you have to kind of pick your zone school to go. And so Wingate became the de facto zone school for anyone living in the Flatbush, East Flatbush area type, depending on where. And just that experience alone, having teachers from different islands. I remember Miss Sylvester was from Grenada, had like Jamaican teachers, and they would talk, and it was just, it was important. There was one Jamaican teacher that knew my mother. I cannot forget when I went to school to get my report card that my mother see me. I said, Steve, and so what, Marcia, and blah, blah, blah. So, those things are just like really, really important, to make that connection now, like when, like in Jamaican parties, back then, you have a little soca segment and your endurance could be that long. Now your endurance is a little longer because you know that you had a lot more people from other islands in the party, so the soca segment tend to get a little longer, or you went to soca party, so the Jamaican now can endure and can do for them version of whining, because whining vary from island to island. It depends on from this wine, slow wine, and to which wine you the wine,
You're right about that.
But it's being in Brooklyn, it's being in the northeastern quarter and experiencing Labor Day and all of these things that allows you to see the connectedness, but at the uniqueness at the same time. And there's being on the islands it's much harder to see that because you're surrounded by other Jamaicans, and I know people travel to different islands, but it's much harder to see it when you're on the island. It's not until you come into like a bigger space where you can see, how much the culture is important, how much of a powerful block or region we can be. But that's for a whole different conversation. Culture, sweet.
We might need to come back and do a part 2. But thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with the Style and Vibes family.
Listen, thank you for having me. I know I'm just going to insert myself in several episodes. So when you're ready, just call me. I'll be happy to do it.
Of course, it's always good having a great conversation. Thank you so much again, and we'll definitely do this again.
All right, later.
Bye. It's always great talking to things with Kerry. Sharing stories about Caribbean heritage comes so natural to both of us. It's important that we stay up to the time culturally while recognizing our rich history and keeping it going with the next generation. Thanks for listening. Do me a favor, leave an honest rating and review for the podcast in Apple Podcasts. It's greatly appreciated, and it will help the show rank in iTunes. We want top ranking around here, Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Style and Vibes podcast. If you like what you hear, and I know you do, share it with your friends and family. If you want more, make sure you visit styleandvibes.com and follow us on our social channels, Twitter and Instagram @Style and Vibes. Until next time, Leah Tommy Peeps.